get on this problem pretty easily. We know how, and we have the money to do it. I told you it costs our society $90 billion a year. That's a lot of money. I've calculated we can entirely end all food insecurity in America for about $24 billion a year. Now, when I was writing this and I showed draft to people, people go, ooh, 24 billion, that's a lot of money. You can't do that, you're crazy. Well, it's about 2% of the Wall Street bailout. Or 3 months of war in Iraq, or 6% of the president's tax cuts, or about what we spent a year in agribusiness corporate welfare. Or, forget all those things, 1/3 of what it costs our society to have hunger. I'd say it's a pretty good investment. But I also challenge progressives not just to call for more of the same big government, but to really think hard and tough, I know I'm mixing, really think carefully about reforming, and that progressives shouldn't be afraid of reform. First and foremost, we need a serious economic policy that not only creates jobs, but creates living wage jobs. Too much of the discussion is a job at any cost. I have a whole section on welfare reform. I work for President Clinton. I believe very deeply in the goals of moving people from welfare to work, but too many social service agencies, the only measure of elected officials and leaders of how welfare reform worked was whether the rolls were reduced. Only measure. To me, that's like judging the success of a hospital by how many people left it, without differentiating between how many people left it cured, equally sick, or dead. There are a lot of ways to measure the success of welfare reform in addition to how many people left the rolls. And so we need a serious economic development policy that doesn't just move people off the rolls, moves people into long-term living wage jobs where they can get food support, where they can get all sorts of other supports, wage subsidies, increased earned income tax credits, health care, so they have a better life off the rolls than not, number one. Number two, a revised, serious safety net. I actually challenge some fellow anti-hunger advocates with something a bit controversial. I actually call for combining the existing safety net program, combining the WIC program with the food stamps program, with the school meals program, having one application at one income level, 185% of poverty level, which for those of you who aren't as quite wonkily crazed as me, that means the poverty level plus 85%. So not to bog you down too much, but right now, food stamps, 130% of the poverty line or below. WIC, 185% of the poverty line. Free meals, 130% of the poverty line. Reduced price meals, 185% of the poverty line. Commodities, depending on where you live. And in most jurisdictions, you have to go to a different office to file for each one, providing a different set of paperwork this high. And, by the way, there's a different bureaucracy at the state level, sometimes the county level, sometimes the school district level, and certainly the state and the federal level to collect all these forms. So I call for combining them, one application, and goodness forbid, spending less money on bureaucracy and more money on feeding hungry people. Lastly, I call for a serious focus on child nutrition programs, having school breakfast in each classroom first period. In New York City and much of the country, 80% of the kids eligible for school breakfast don't get it. They have to go to a separate lunchroom and announce, I'm the poor kid, where's my breakfast? Who's going to do that? By serving it in the breakfast, I blast Mayor Bloomberg all throughout my book for reactionary policies on food stamps and poverty, but I actually give him fair credit on school breakfast. He's done something pioneering and visionary, and he's also very visionary in supporting national service, and we love that. But he is starting a pilot project in 250 schools where you're actually getting breakfast in the classroom, and we think that is a model. And lastly, I close with talking about the role of nonprofit groups. We shouldn't go away, but we should go back to filling in the gaps, innovating, doing things government can't do. In the hunger sector, if we're just treading water every day, doing what government should be doing, we can never do what we do best. So I say government does best is make benefits. My mother was just on Social Security for a few decades. She never got a check a day late. Once you're in the program, and food stamps is a whole other issue for recertification, which is a major hassle, but once you're in the program, you get them. And so if government ground out sort of make benefits, then nonprofits could do what we do best. And that's the continuum of service. I also talk a little about community gardens and urban farms. I say we need to do more of this, but also challenge the Michael Pollins of the world to say, telling all poor people they got to have a garden in a city like Boston or New York, where there's not a 12-month growing season, is a little preposterous. And by the way, for my friends in the organic food movement who say that increasing food prices are a good thing because it's going to make the international food system more just, that's bunk. Higher prices are bad for poor people, and I'm one progressive who's willing to say that. So we need community food security efforts that have economic reality. But we do all these things and get President Obama to live up to his promise. You know, Franklin Roosevelt used to tell a story. Labor unions came to him and said, Mr. President, we want you to do this, this, and this. And he said, you know what? I agree with you, but it's your job to go out there and make me do it. And it's our job to get President-elect Obama to keep his promises to dramatically expand national service so it will be a rite of passage for all Americans. And it's our job to make him keep his pledge of ending child hunger in America by 2015. And one line about national service, one other additional line, is that it really is an amazing tool for fighting hunger. I have a staff of 9 people. We have 10 programs, a staff of 9 people. I have 15 VISTA National Service participants full-time for a year, and about 24 part-time AmeriCorps National Service participants. They dramatically increase our work. They do community gardens, they do nutrition education, they're signing people up for food stamps, they're bringing pantries and kitchens together to do neighborhood network building in a way that a government agency just couldn't. They are filling in the gaps. They are building a new generation of leadership. A lot of people graduate our program to enter the public sector and continue to serve, enter the private sector and donate. And we've had people who do both, and I know City Year is great at cultivating their alumni. You know, when I interviewed for my job in 2001, there were very few serious candidates for my job because everyone in the hunger movement, you know, had started their programs in the 80s, so you do the math. You know, when we're done with City Year, and when we're done with, you know, our AmeriCorps programs, we're going to have this incredible new generation of people doing public service. I want you to think one more thing. A city official in New York told me they recently saw a kid going through a dumpster to get breakfast. Going through a dumpster to get breakfast. And I want you to think that there are certain things in American society that were once thought to be inevitable that are now unthinkable. This country had slavery. I still can't believe it. People were sold because of their skin color. The kids were taken away from them. God forbid they didn't work 6 or 7 days a week, they'd be whipped or killed if they wanted to escape. And even if they came to a free city of the North, much of American history, they could be sent back. We have that in America? That was seen as inevitable. Hopefully, virtually all Americans will now know that's unthinkable. You heard my story, the kid looking forward to his 14th birthday, he got to go to work in the factory. And by the way, another thing I uncovered, it's not in the book, when the lead opponents, I said nice things about the Catholic Church all throughout my book because they've done incredible things in fighting hunger, but back then they were the lead opponents of a constitutional amendment to ban child labor, and it was the Cardinal of Boston who is one of the leaders of that, because he said it's the church's role and the parents' role to determine who works. Anyway, just a good Boston story. And I say we work very closely with Catholic Charities in New York. They do amazing work, you know, around the country and around the world. But it was thought as just inevitable that we'd have child labor. You know what breaker boys were? They were little kids, little kids. Their job was to go into the front of the anthracite coal mine and break up the anthracite coal with their fingers. They'd often lose fingers, lose arms, get black lung for sometimes 6 or 7 days a week, 4 weeks out of the month, for pennies a month. That was seen as inevitable, and now it's unthinkable. So I want you to band together with us. We build national service, we end hunger. So I come back here in 10 years. We'll go, people choosing between cancer medicine and food? That's unthinkable. Kids embarrassed to get school breakfast because of stigma? That's unthinkable. 4 of the largest states in the United States requiring people to provide fingerprints. They're working and they just can't afford to feed their families. That's unthinkable. Kids in this country forced to scavenge through dumpsters in the back of their schools to get food. With your help, we're going to make that unthinkable too. Thank you.